Martin Kiszko, welcome back to India. This is your second time at the Mumbai Lit Festival.
Thank you, it's good to be back.
Clearly like coming back here.
I love it. I love being involved with the festival. It's a great meeting place to not only get to grips with literature from all over the planet, but also to meet some very interesting authors, poets, journalists, and to interact, to find out where they're coming from and what we have in common or what we don't have in common.
Okay, so last year was your first time in India, not just at the Lit Festival, the first time in India ever. So how was it? Was it a bit overwhelming?
It was. Yeah, of course. I'd always wanted to come to India, and so that was a great ambition fulfilled. But actually taking on the festival as well as India at the same time was quite a handful.
But does anything really prepare you for India?
I don't know. You can watch a few movies, can't you? And I've written the music for a lot of natural history films,
okay.
and so I've seen quite a lot of what India is about. But you can never experience it properly unless you're actually here, can you?
What's the first thing that sort of struck you?
About India?
Yeah, or maybe, just as a creative person, as a writer, as someone who's a music composer. I'm sure that, things that appeal to creative people.
Well, do you know what struck me particularly, because I'm very interested in green issues and environmental issues, and as you know, I write about them quite a lot. Some of the initiatives of recycling and the way that people, I was in the markets and I was seeing the way that people were actually making new things out of old things, or repairing things over and over again. And that was one thing that really excited me, because it's something that we don't see very often now in the UK, because of course consumerism is kind of very widespread, and one tends to kind of just buy something new rather than mend something.
Rather than go into a recycle.
Yeah.
You are known as the your billing, so to say, at the festival is the green poet from the UK.
The UK's green poet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? Because you also have a parallel career, very successful parallel career as a music composer. So how did the green poetry happen, and what brought that on?
It was amazing, really, because I'd always been interested as a composer in environmental issues. And my father was interested in environmental issues and loved the countryside and loved the forests and so on, and as a child I spent a lot of time in those environments, and I found that I was as a composer writing music for natural history films. So again, I was very much involved with the environment. And then a few years ago, when my children were a bit younger, they were coming home from school talking all about environmental issues, and I thought, well, actually I don't really know enough about what's going on, so I thought I'm going to teach myself a little bit about environmental issues. So every week I wrote one poem. Over a year I wrote one poem every week, and at the end of the year I had a book of poetry, a collection of poetry. And suddenly, just one day, I was working at the computer and the title Green Poems for a Blue Planet just flashed into my head like that. I didn't know why or anything, but I just thought, I've got to go with this. I was then in America, and in the US I was in New York, and I met a lady called Frances Arnold, one of the America's and one of the world's greatest scientists, in fact. And I said, we were having breakfast, and I said to her, could I perform some of the poems for you? So she said, yeah, that'd be great. So I got up on the sidewalk just there and then outside near this restaurant table, and I performed some of the poetry, and she said, oh, that's great, you must come to Los Angeles and we'll set up a performance for you there. So that's what I did. Went to LA, did a performance, went really well, went back to the UK. On the strength of that performance I got a publisher, and the first book took off, and it was, I kind of call myself an accidental poet. And even with the branding of the UK's Green Poet, I was performing at a festival, and I finished my performance, and somebody out of the audience came up to me and they said, so you must be the UK's Green Poet then. And I thought,
okay, that's me.
Yes, I think I'm going to use that.
Okay, but would it be right to say that these are poems for a younger audience, or is it, I mean, in its appeal, it's universal, but you write for younger people?
It really is the poems are for a universal audience. They tend to end up in the hands of 8 to 13-year-olds. 8 to 13-year-olds seem to, I have invented this this style of poetry, or kind of poetry, called not poetry but poetry.
Poetry, yes.
Poetry.
You must elaborate more on that.
Yeah, so poems all about poo.
Lovely.
Yeah, so my most famous one that I do in the UK is called Poo Power. So when I go in, the audience goes Poo Power, Poo Power, give me this salute, and that's a poem all about how we can create energy from poo.
Okay.
But now today at the festival, I've done a brand new poem premiered here today called Planet Poo.
Okay.
Because I'm convinced there must be a planet somewhere in the universe that's made out of poo.
We could we could maybe find that for you.
Yes, okay.
Okay, and when you're going out to children, or if your audience is children, they can be brutally honest.
Yeah.
How tough is that?
They are brutally honest, but luckily for me,
They're hard to please.
It's positive feedback.
Okay, so far.
I've really enjoyed the relationship with children in the audiences that I perform to, and in the workshops where I've worked with children, I've had some fantastic emails from children. In fact, I was working a couple of weeks ago with a boy in a workshop in the UK, in a poetry workshop, and we were doing a kind of poem called a kennin, which is a very ancient form of poetry. And he wrote this kennin for me, and he was dyslexic, he had learning difficulties, and his teacher said, oh, he never writes anything at all, he never bothers to do anything. And yet he'd created this poem in my workshop, and he gave it to me, and he said, Martin, he said, when you go to India, will you take this poem to show the children in India?
And tell me this, since you have now performed here in front of a primarily Indian audience, what has the vibe been? Are there differences? Are there cultural differences, or is it the same? Is it the same?
When I came last year, I was expecting for there to be cultural differences, but there weren't any.
Okay.
And I found that this year, even with some of the new material that I introduced, for instance, I've got a poem and presentation which is all about I go around Europe spotting litter and spotting rubbish, and I photograph it. And so I'm like an ornithologist, I'm like a twitcher, and I show people, I go, this is a bottle that I spotted in Germany, or this is a plastic container I spotted in the UK.
Can I take you for a walk around Mumbai? I think you will not stop
I haven't
clicking.
seen
Really?
anything
Sure.
since I've been here.
Sure.
Oh, honest.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, and really, last few questions. You said you're an accidental writer, but how tough is the whole process of writing? It can be quite lonely as well, isn't it?
Accidental poet, yeah. Let's put it this way, I don't know anything else. Ever since I was a child, I was writing poetry. I became a composer, 30 years as a composer, spent writing in isolation, except when I was working with the orchestras, of course. And then this foray into being this accidental green poet. Yes, I'm just used to that whole creative process of being by myself and writing. And somebody asked me today, do you get anything like writer's block? And for me, writer's block can't exist because often I'm working to deadlines and so on. And I think that what's important is, you have to put the mark on the paper, whether it's just one word, even if you don't think it's a great word or a great note of music. You put it on the paper and you start working with it. And by the end of the day, you hone it and you make it into something beautiful, you make it into something that works. So writer's block, no, that doesn't really exist for me.
And there is a second volume of poems which is supposed to be out.
Yeah, second collection of poems is we've just finished it. Nick has just finished the front cover of it, which looks absolutely amazing. Lots of amazing illustrations inside. Another 54 poems on not just green issues, but issues, things like what it means to be a green teenager, which I call a greenager.
Greenager, okay.
Yeah, and what it means to lots of poems about things like shopping, or about how we dress and how we, how much stuff we should own. And it's called Verse for the Earth, More Green Poems for a Blue Planet.
And when is that launching?
That's going to launch by March of 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Martin, thank you so much for this, and I hope you have more India plans. You're going to go beyond Mumbai on this trip, on this leg?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Delhi and visit Agra, of course, and Jaipur, and then I'm going on to Pune, and then I'll be leaving for the UK. So I hope by the time I've left that if you're not a greenie by then, you at least tell me that you're a non-greenie or that you might just be an in-betweener.
Okay, and I think I can't let you go before a little, like, if you could just give a little sort of sample from your poems, a little bit, like, for our viewers.
Okay.
Just one of any
I'll
one
give
of them.
you. I'll give you a little bit of. Well, I'd like to do poo power for you, if
sure,
I may.
of course, since you spoke
I'd
so
like
much
to do
about
poo
it. yeah.
power. Poo power. In England's green and pleasant land, find a field that's close at hand. Choose a cud-chewing herd of cows that has no toilet training vows. Wait until they finish tea. Collect their dung and all their pee. Stick the cow pats in a tank. Hold your breath, 'cause it smells mank. Put a lid on firm and tight. Stir the slurry every night. Heat it up to 95 degrees until well curdled and sludgy. Whistle a time-passing sweet refrain as bacterial bugs create methane, which, as you know, is biogas your cows have made from eating grass. So now you've solved the mooted question of anaerobic tank digestion, a fancy name for making fuel not from crude oil, but from a poo. So entertain your friends for hours, turning poo into power.
Thank you, Martin. That was the most entertaining writer interview I've ever done. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.